guys, how's it going? Welcome to my October wrap-up. October was a surprisingly good reading month. I was feeling a little bit slumpy at the starting of the month, I think just because September was just not a great reading month, but I actually ended up reading 7 books and I liked most of them. So let's just get straight into talking about them. I'm going to start with a book that I started towards the end of September and took almost a full month to read, but that is The Sacred Bones by Michael Burns. This, I had high hopes for it. It seemed really interesting. The tagline is Spies, Murder, Conspiracy, One Unholy Trinity. And that just sounded really cool. Basically, it's a mystery about there is a artifact that is found and they think that it might be the bones of Jesus Christ. So you're kind of following 2 main stories. So there's one of the team that's trying to figure out what was stolen, who stole it, etc. And then you're also following a team that received the artifact and is trying to find out if it's real, etc. It just wasn't well written. It was really like info dumpy and a lot of really heavy world building, but it takes place in the real world and in pretty much modern day. So it was just, it felt very heavy-handed. The main character, who's in the Vatican as a scientist, she, for like the first couple chapters, every single night she goes on a walk around the city and she's talking about all the restaurants she sees and the sights she sees, and it just gets so boring and repetitive. I didn't really care about any of the characters. Also, the ending of this was so stupid. We don't get a satisfying conclusion. Like, it doesn't feel, I don't know, satisfying in any way. And there is one interesting element with one of the characters. It is revealed very early on, but the main character, Charlotte Hennessy, she has bone cancer and she hasn't told anybody yet and she's trying to deal with it and it's incurable, inoperable, whatever it is, I can't remember, and it's kind of interesting. The way that they solve it at the end is the dumbest thing I've ever read. It was such a cop-out by the author, and just the whole way that they handled that, they really dropped the ball. Like, you could make that really interesting. And also, like, she's studying bones while having bone cancer. Like, there's so many parallels you could have drawn, but nope. All in all, I didn't care about the characters. The story was really lackluster. It was dry. I didn't like the writing style, and the mystery was not satisfying. So there was definitely some spots that I liked, and I was interested in the beginning, but like I said, 3 out of 10. Yes? On a much better note, the next book I read was the audiobook for A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I really liked this. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. I had heard a lot of people talking about this book, and I heard a lot of praise about it, but I just never really, I don't know, planned on picking it up. And then I saw the audiobook available at my local library and decided to give it a try, and I am really glad that I did. I thought the story was interesting and I liked the world building, just the way the world was built. It just came together in a really interesting way, and I absolutely adored the characters. The 2 main characters are just so much fun. I love their dry and like witty sense of humor, and they are just so much fun to just follow along, and I loved their banter, and I definitely really liked that. The one thing that I didn't like in this was I found the final like battle scene was kind of underwhelming. I just expected more. Like, I was hoping it would be a bigger deal or more dramatic, but it didn't quite meet my expectations. But I liked the rest of the story, I liked the rest of the world, and I'm really excited to see what the rest of the series is going to be like. I think I'm going to end up switching to physical books though for the rest of the series rather than audiobook, because for fantasy books or anything with heavier world building or more magic, stuff like that, I just retain the information better physically reading it rather than audiobooks. So I think I'm going to see if my library has the physical books. If not, I might buy them for myself because I really liked the first one and I think I would like to own this series eventually, but yes, I will eventually read them, I just don't know when. The next audiobook I listened to was The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu by Joshua Hammer. This, I gave it a 5 out of 10, like very mediocre in the middle. I enjoyed it, but it was not at all what I expected. The way that the synopsis was written and also the look of the cover and the name made it sound like it was light or fun or adventure-y. Like, and the cover honestly looks a little bit like middle grade almost to me, but it was not. It was very much a history story, and it was very dry, and it was okay because I do like historical novels and history stories, stuff like that, so it was still interesting to me, but it was not at all what I expected. And I think that if you don't want a dry history about like the wars in Timbuktu and the rise and fall of different political leaders and different movements, it basically read like a history textbook, which again I kind of enjoyed, but I was expecting an adventure story. I'm definitely glad that I listened to the audiobook for this one though, because I think if I would have physically read it, it would have been a lot more obvious how dry and slow it was at times, but because I just listened to it as an audiobook like on the walk to and from work, it wasn't as bad and I could just listen to it and enjoy it. So again, I liked it, it was just not at all what I expected. Next, I reread Kissing Doorknobs by Terry Spencer Hesser. I have an entire reading vlog for this. I read this for OCD Awareness Week, and I'm very glad that I did. I gave this a 9 out of 10. This was my first OCD related book I read as a kid. I think I read it when I was about 10 years old. I didn't understand what OCD was back then, and I definitely didn't know that I had OCD back then. But in retrospect, this book just really sums up how my OCD was. I'm going to link the reading vlog up above and down below so that if you want my more in-depth thoughts, that'll be in there. But a quick recap, this book was very, very good. If you have OCD and you're not in the strongest mental place, I would recommend waiting a while before reading this book because it's very realistic. It does a very good job at showing how the compulsions kind of come to be, how the obsessions get stuck in our head. Like it's very well done, but that can potentially be triggering. I also think that my favorite thing about this book is it does contain a relapse, and I just think that's something that's so important to talk about because relapses happen, like they're going to happen, and I think that addressing that and showing it and not portraying it in a way that feels like failure, because when you do have a relapse, you feel disappointed in yourself for the most part, and you feel like, you know, all your hard work was undone and you feel like a failure, and it's really hard to pick yourself back up from that. So I think that portraying that in this novel was a very, very great decision. This is a very young adult. The main character, we follow her from the time she's, I think, like 12 to 16, so somewhere in that age range. But I really think that this would be perfect for kids or teens that are around that age who are dealing with OCD or recently diagnosed with OCD, because it's written in a very clear way and it's just a very, very fun book. The only other thing I do want to mention just as quick trigger warnings is obviously it talks quite a lot about OCD and the anxiety behind it and what OCD feels like. There's also brief mentions of eating disorders, teen pregnancy, and some brief drug use. So if that's something that is triggering for you, maybe take a pass on this one, but if not, definitely recommend this book. The next book I read was The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I liked this more than I expected. I gave this one a 6 out of 10. I did enjoy especially the last half of the story, but the first half was kind of confusing, to be honest. To be fair, it's because I started listening to it on audiobook, and the audiobook had a prologue that I just found really, really confusing. It was written by the author, but not Nathaniel Hawthorne, the supposed author who was writing this, and it just, I couldn't figure out who the narrator was. It felt really out of place, and then I was trying to read along with the physical book, and that isn't even in my copy, so it was just very, very confusing, and I wasn't sure when we're actually into the story itself, but eventually I just used this copy. It was so much easier, and I did like it. It was kind of dry in the beginning, and I mean, it's a classic. It's a different writing style, but I really did enjoy it. I liked Hester Prynne as a character. I liked Pearl. I thought that was kind of interesting. I liked her relationship and her interactions with the different townspeople. I liked what was going on with the Reverend, and it was pretty entertaining. I gave it a 6 out of 10 because as a novel and holding it up, comparing it with other stories that I've enjoyed, it was only okay, but as a classic and as something that I'm mostly just reading so I can experience it and understand it, I enjoyed that part of it. So it was slightly better than mediocre, so I figured 6 out of 10 is fair. The next book I read was the audiobook of Panic by Lauren Oliver. I gave it an 8 out of 10. It's a thriller about a small town, and every year the graduating class, the last summer before they go away to college, there's a game called Panic. And it's basically like a dare game, kind of like Chicken, and they have to compete in the different challenges, and the one that lasts through all of them and survives, etc., wins a large amount of money. I would have kind of preferred it though if the challenges would have been a little bit bigger or a little bit more in detail. It was a lot more about the main characters we follow, their life, and also the game, and I think I would have preferred if the game would have been a bit more of a priority, just because that was what really interested me. Aside from that, it was very romance heavy that I just didn't care about. One thing that I didn't know was in the story, but was an interesting surprise, I guess, was there was actually OCD rep. One of the secondary characters, Natalie, they never straight out say that she has OCD, but she's always counting things and washing her hands, and she wants everything to be even. And while I appreciated the attempt, I just felt like there should have been more research to it. Like, she was almost a caricature of OCD, and not in a way that was disrespectful, just in a way that seemed uneducated. It just could have been written a lot better. Like, anytime she got stressed, the main character would just mention that they heard her counting, and then she wasn't counting anything, she was just counting, and she's making out with this guy, and she keeps stopping him to say, oh no, wait, kiss my other cheek, it's uneven, and like things like that. There's one scene where she gets really stressed out and she's washing her hands in boiling hot water, and I don't know, it's not necessarily inaccurate, it's just very, very generic. So it was nice that it was there, I just wish it would have been done better. Also, I hated her as a character. This had nothing to do with the OCD rep. She was just a shitty person, and it's never addressed by the other characters. Like, her love interest doesn't seem to care about it, her best friend just lets it go, and if you're gonna have a character have that type of behavior, do it for a reason. Like, make them learn at the end that, oh, maybe they shouldn't treat people badly, or have one of the other characters call them out on it. Like, something. But they just, I don't know, everyone was okay with it, and they just accepted it at the end that, oh, she's just using everybody, oh well. So I wish that would have been better done, but overall as a story, it was entertaining, and that's why I picked it out, because it seemed exciting, and it was, so 8 out of 10. And last, but definitely not least, my favorite book that I read all month, They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Oh, I cried a lot. I gave this a 9.5 out of 10. I actually listened to this on audiobook, and as soon as the audiobook ended, I went online and I bought this book. I needed to own it. I love it so much. I really want to reread it already. I spent so much time crying. In case you couldn't tell by the title, it's a very sad book. It takes place in mostly our world, but they've ended up, it's not really overly explained, but they're able to predict when people are gonna die. So between like midnight and 3 a.m. on the day you're gonna die, you get a phone call and says, hey, you're gonna die today. We don't know when or how or anything like that. Just at some point today, it's your last day. Enjoy your last day. And it follows 2 main characters that get the call, and it's just them living their last day. And there's an app called Last Friend, and it's basically just like a social networking app for people that it either is their last day or they want to connect with someone whose last day it is. And these 2 boys end up meeting and just spend the day together, and it is a super cute love story. And you know me, I don't care about romance most of the time, but this one was so freaking cute. It was so freaking well done. I loved it. I loved their chemistry. I loved the way it was written. I think I also helped that I loved both characters so much. And it's one of those books that, like, it's called They Both Die at the End. It says in the synopsis, they are both going to die. It says at the very beginning of the book, they're both going to die. But you're still the entire book just hoping maybe they don't die. And it's so good. So yeah, I loved this book. I loved the world. I loved the characters. I loved their relationships, and just all the relationship, like the two main characters' relationship with each other, and one of the boys, his relationship with his best friends, like he's from a foster home, and just his relationship with all of his foster siblings is just so nice to see. The other character, Mateo, his relationship with his father and with his best friend and her daughter, like I really loved the way that all of these characters were written. It was also a really clever book because you're following them around for their entire day, and sometimes they're crossing paths with somebody else, and there's a couple other chapters from like other background characters' point of view, and like they'll walk by somebody and then it'll kind of show them and see what their day was like, and like you follow a couple other minor characters, and it's just really interesting to get all these different perspectives of the same day and the same events. It is just such an amazing and beautiful ride, and it is heartbreaking and beautiful, and there were so many different parts where I just bawled. I'm glad that I chose the audiobook because I would not have been able to see for a lot of this, and I would have had to keep stopping and like wiping tears off the pages. So I highly recommend this book, but if you cry easily like I do, try the audiobook. So that is all I have for today. Those are my 7 books I read. If you read any of these books, let me know down below because I would love to talk about them. Or if you want to talk about anything spoilery, you can always message me on Twitter. My Twitter is always linked down below. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button to let me know, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date. I usually post videos every Wednesday and Sunday, usually reading or writing related, but for the entire month of November, I'm posting Nanowrimo vlogs 5 days a week, and then my other 2 videos are going to be not Nanowrimo vlogs. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please subscribe. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye!